Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this digital service of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. My name is Birch Spick. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs, and I'm a member of this congregation's celebrant team. Heidi Levine is our celebrant this morning. Bruce and Barb Martin are our pianist and song leader. Thanks to Kent Newman for recording our special music this morning. And thanks to Nicholas Watson and Devin McClurkin for putting together our story for all ages. Anne Mowry is our pastoral care associate for the coming week. And if there is any support she can offer you, be sure to reach out to her. As we settle into this time together, let's
my name
offer up
so that they won't kick me out. I'm not worried about it. No, I don't know that. I think it might be Birch.
As we settle into this time together, let's offer up a moment of silence to remember and acknowledge that wherever we are on Indigenous land. The land our congregation's building is built on is in the traditional territory of the Bakoje people, known also as the Iowa, who live primarily now in the states of Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma.
Mike.
The Lens of the Future Committee also wants to share an announcement here before we begin this service. The committee is continuing to monitor the incidence of COVID-19 infections in the community and the status of the indicators that have been adopted by the board. In the past week, the 14-day average positivity rate for tests in Polk County has been steadily increasing and is now at 14.5%. This rate must be below 8% before the committee will consider recommending a return to outdoor in-person meetings. The number of active cases in Polk County and the state are increasing, with the state up over 30% so far in October. Both are well above the threshold that has been set for reopening the church. The total number of cases in the state is also the highest ever recorded. The church is currently at level 0, which does not allow for any in-person meetings or business use except as specifically authorized by the board. The committee does not expect to recommend any change in the current status in the next 2 weeks. This morning, I want to talk about something that's been weighing on my mind through this pandemic, and maybe it's weighed on some of your minds as well. I want to talk with you about apocalypse. Not like a sign you might see on a street corner that says the end is near, or even horror movie apocalypses to complement our service about monsters and I-it relationships from last week. But I want to reflect with you on how apparent the reality of the world becomes when it seems like the worst is truly happening. And I want to spend this time talking about what dire straits reveal about us as well. So with that in mind, I open this service with these words by the Reverend Sean Parker Dennison from his poem, How to Survive an Apocalypse. When the world ends, we must not add destruction to destruction, not accept a beggar's bargain to fight death with more death. In order to survive the apocalypse, any apocalypse at all, we have to give up the counterfeit currency of self-sufficiency, the mistaken addiction to competition, the lie that the last to die has somehow survived.
The words with which we light our chalice are also by Reverend Sean Parker Dennison. There is no competition between light and the darkness which holds it. Both the light and the darkness are holy. We light our chalice not to defeat the darkness, but because for a time we need the gifts of flame, warmth and light to guide us and help us in our endeavors. And when the time comes, we will embrace again the gentle dark, which allows us rest. Our gathering song this morning is number 137, We Utter Our Cry. Please keep your mics muted and sing along at home as Barb leads us in this song. The words will be posted in the chat.
We utter our cry that peace may prevail, that earth will survive and faith must not fail. We pray with our life for the world in our care, for people diminished by doubt and despair. We cry from the fright of our daily scene for strength to say no to all that is mean. Designs here in chaos extinguish of life, all energy wasted on weapons of death. We lift up our hearts for children unborn. Give wisdom, O God, that we may hand on, replenished and tended, this good planet Earth, preserving the future and wonder of birth.
Good morning. My name is Heidi Levine. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the celebrant for this morning's service. Whether you are with us for the hour, for a lifetime, or somewhere in between, thank you for joining us in this committee that grows ethically and spiritually, serves justly, and loves radically. This digital service is being recorded and will be available to view later on the church's website and YouTube page. Please feel free to keep your cameras on, but please keep your mics muted in consideration of one another. After the service, we'll sort into breakout rooms for a virtual coffee hour for conversation, fellowship, and your favorite snack or drink, and we welcome you to turn your mics back on at that time. This Sunday, we are spotlighting one of our 2 Faith in Action partners for the year, Planned Parenthood North Central States. Planned Parenthood North Central States is committed to providing, promoting, and protecting reproductive and sexual health through high-quality care, education, and advocacy. In 2019, Planned Parenthood provided a wide range of affordable, high-quality reproductive and sexual health care to more than 19,600 Iowans. This year, donor support will help us provide a variety of services in Central Iowa, including patient-centered intensive care for marginalized populations, health services including contraception, STI treatment and counseling, cancer screenings, annual preventive care visits, and more. Patient assistance funds and financial counseling to maximize mainstream benefits and age-appropriate, research-informed education programs.
Thank you for sharing that, Heidi. Our special music for this morning is performed by our own Kent Newman.
I believe that every heart is kind. Some are just a little underused. Hatred is a symptom of the times. Lost in these uneducated blues. I just want to love you while I can. All these other thoughts have me confused. I don't need to try to understand. Maybe I'll get up, turn off the news. Turn off the news and build a garden, just my neighborhood and me. We might feel a bit less hardened, we might feel a bit more free. Turn off the news and raise your kids, give them something to believe in. Teach them how to be good people, give them hope that they can see. Hope that they can see. Turn off the news and build a garden with me. Trust builds trust. All that negativity's a bust. Trust builds trust. Don't you wanna be happy? Turn off the news and build a garden, just my neighborhood and me. We might feel a bit less hardened, we might feel a bit more free. Turn off the news and raise the kids, give them something to believe in. Teach them how to be good people, give them hope that they can see. Hope that they can see. Turn off the news and build a garden with me. Turn off the news and build a garden with me. Turn off the news and build a garden with me. Let's do it, shall we?
And if you're out there, thank you so much for that special music. Our story for all ages this morning is an adaptation of a story by Leo Tolstoy, retold by John J. Muth, and read for us this morning by Nicholas Watson.
It's based on a story by Leo Tolstoy, written and illustrated by John J. Muth. There once was a boy named Nikolai, who sometimes felt uncertain about the right way to act. I want to be a good person, he told his friends, but I don't know the best way to do that. Nikolai's friends understood, and they wanted to help him. If only I could find the answers to my 3 questions, Nikolai continued. Then I would always know what to do, when is the best time to do things, who is the most important one, and what is the right thing to do. Nikolai's friends considered his first question. Then Sonia, the heron, spoke. To know the best time to do things, one must plan in advance, she said. Gogol the monkey, who had been rooting through some leaves to find something good to eat, said, you will know when to do things if you watch and pay close attention. Then Pushkin, dog, who was just dozing off, rolled over and said, you can't just pay attention to everything yourself. You need a pack to keep watch and help you decide when to do things. For example, Gogol, a coconut is about to fall on your head. Nikolai thought for a moment, and then he asked his second question. Who is the most important one? Those are the closest to heaven, said Sonia, circling up in the sky. Those who know how to heal the sick, said Gogol, stroking his bruised noggin. Those who make the rules, growled Pushkin. Nikolai thought some more, and then he asked the third question. What is the right thing to do? Flying, said Sonia. Having a good time all the time, laughed Gogol. Fighting, barked Pushkin. Right away then, the boy thought for a long while. He loved his friends. He knew they were all trying their best to help him answer his question, but their answers didn't seem quite right. Then an idea came to him. I know, he thought. I will ask Leo the turtle. He has lived a very long time. Surely he will know the answers I'm looking for. Nikolai hiked up high into the mountain where the old turtle lived, all alone. When Nikolai arrived, he found Leo digging a garden. The turtle was old, and digging was hard for him. I have 3 questions, and I came to ask for your help, Nikolai said. When is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? What is the right thing to do? Leo listened carefully, but he only smiled. Then he went on with his digging. You must be tired, Nikolai said at last. Let me help you. The turtle gave him his shovel and thanked him. And because it was easier for the young boy to dig than it was an old turtle, Nikolai kept digging until all the rows were finished. But just as they finished, the wind blew quickly and rain burst from the darkened clouds. As they moved towards the cottage for shelter, Nikolai suddenly heard a cry for help. Running down the path, he found a panda whose leg had been injured by a fallen branch. Carefully, Nikolai carried her into Leo's house and made a splint for her leg with a stick of bamboo. The storm raged on, banging at the doors and windows. The panda woke up. Where am I? She said. And where is my child? The boy ran out of the cottage and down the path. The roar of the storm was deafening, pushing against the howling wind and drenching rain. He ran farther into the forest, where he found the panda's child, cold and shivering on the ground. The little panda was wet and scared, but alive. Nikolai carried her inside and made her warm and dry. Then he laid her in her mother's arms. Leo smiled when he saw what the boy had done. The next morning, the sun was warm, birds sang, and all was well with the world. The panda's leg was healing, and she thanked Nikolai for saving her and her baby from the storm. At that moment, Sonia, Gogol, and Pushkin arrived to make sure everything was all right. Nikolai felt great peace within himself. He had wonderful friends, and he had saved the panda and her child. But he also felt disappointed. He still had not found the answers to his 3 questions, and so he asked Leo one more time. The old turtle looked at the boy. But your questions have been answered, he said. Have they? Asked the boy. Yesterday, if you had not stayed to help me dig my garden, you wouldn't have heard the panda's cry for help in the storm, Therefore, the most important time was the time you spent digging the garden. The most important one at the moment was me. The most important thing to do was help me with my garden. Later, when you found the injured panda, the most important time was the time you spent mending her leg and saving her child. The most important ones were the panda and her baby. And the most important thing to do was take care of them and make them safe. Remember then, there is only one important time, and that time is now. The most important one is the one who you are with. The most important thing to do is to do good for the one who is standing at your side. These, my dear boy, are the answers to what is most important in the world. And this is why we are here. Thank you.
Chloe Siebert had never heard the term mutual aid before the pandemic. But when New York City started shutting down, she learned that a bunch of her neighbors in Queens were banding together to find ways to support the community, buying and delivering groceries, picking up prescriptions, and doing other errands for those who are elderly or immunocompromised. And she started volunteering immediately. These days, she spends a lot of her free time connecting people in her neighborhood who need help with those who are able to give it through the Astoria Mutual Aid Network. I think the pandemic revealed to a lot of people who have the privilege of not being aware of this before, the gaps in care in the communities that we live in, and the gaps in support for people who are most vulnerable in these times. She said in an interview with Samantha Fields for American Public Media's Marketplace. This is a community where we care for one another, physically, ethically, spiritually. Our pledges and donations support the work of this congregation in nourishing our lives, and our Sunday donations support the work of nurturing our values. So in this offering, let us be grateful for all that we have and all that we can share. Half of the offering received this morning goes to our congregation's social justice work, and half will be split with our Faith in Action partners to support their work in our communities. While we're outside of our physical church, instead of passing the offering basket, we encourage you to use the giving page in our church's website or mobile app, and the link will be posted in the chat. That was beautiful, Bruce. In this congregation, made distant by space, but connected by our care for one another, we gather each Sunday to tend to one another's joys and concerns. We minister to each other, however that may need to look like. When we are in person, we lift up the names of those people we hold in our minds and our hearts, aloud or silently. If you are carrying someone in joy or concern this morning, you may share their name in the chat box. Let our hearts also be with all of those people near and far, the whole world over, who are in need of care and who care for their communities. We lift up and keep in our minds and our hearts the people who work to meet the needs of their communities, the people continuing to speak out against injustice, the frontline workers in healthcare and service industries, the families and communities grieving the loss of loved ones. May we bear witness to atrocities that flash before our eyes in quick succession. May we bear witness to the struggles to overcome which we have not yet seen. When we gather together in our congregation's building, it is our tradition to light 3 candles, one for the joys and concerns we have shared, one for the names we have spoken and written, and one for all that remains unspoken, but carried gently in our hearts. Outside of our building, gathered here together, we take a moment to honor these joys and sorrows.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul.
Our first reading this morning is from Apocalypse Now by Nandini Rosine Mehru. The word apocalypse is derived from the Greek apokalypsis, meaning uncovering, disclosure, revelation. This is in stark contrast to our contemporary use of the word as some mass destruction of the world. That revelation has come in our minds to be associated with destruction, perhaps points to our dogged determination to remain fixed in our ideas. We have to be brought to our knees, faced with annihilation, emotionally and mentally destroyed before we can open our minds to a revealing of the truth. To describe this apocalypse, this revealing as intense, seems an understatement. Perfect vision is referred to as 2020 vision. Oh, the irony of the year 2020 asking us to fully see so many things that have been swept under the rug, hidden in plain sight, or simply ignored. Plato's allegory of the cave, where a cave-dwelling group of people mistake shadows cast on the walls for the real things which actually cast the shadows, calls on us to not continue believing in the shadows to which we have become accustomed, but embrace the reality of things as they are revealed in full light. At the beginning of the pandemic, we yearned for things to return to the normal that dictated our everyday lives. That normal incorporated deeply divided politics, racial disparities, poverty levels wholly unacceptable in one of the richest countries, an inept healthcare system. Shadows indeed. Now that the light has been shown on the things creating these shadows, the future is very much for our making. Do we return to the accustomed comforts of our caves and continue believing in the shadows? The light has been shown on so much that needs to be made better. It is a daunting prospect to find the will to address each of these steps. But perhaps we underestimate our power.
These words for reflection are from Etel Adnan's poem, Surge. I will offer us some words to meditate on alongside this poem, and then we will enter a moment of silent contemplation, meditation, or prayer for 3 minutes. A long night I spent thinking that reality was the story of the human species, the vanquished search for the vanquished. Sounds come by, ruffling my soul. I sense space's elasticity, go on reading the books she wrote on the wars she's seen. Why do seasons who regularly follow their appointed time deny their kind of energy to us? Why is winter followed by a few more days of winter? We came to transmit the shimmering from which we came, to name it. We deal with a permanent voyage, the becoming of that which itself had become. How great the world is. Its elasticity boundless, ineffable, so much greater than the winter before us, so much greater than our expectation of when that winter will end. How the world shimmers at the edges of our field of vision, rushing out far beyond our line of sight, on voyages we will never comprehend. But how great this vision is to see both near at hand and from this to imagine the unimaginable. I sit with this revelation.
Our second reading is an excerpt from the article, What Really Happens After the Apocalypse by Arkady Martin. The myth that panic, looting, and antisocial behavior increases during the apocalypse or apocalyptic-like scenarios is in fact a myth and has been solidly disproven by multiple scientific studies. The National Earthquake Hazards Reduction Program, a research group within the United States Federal Emergency Management Administration, or FEMA, has produced research that shows over and over again that disaster victims are assisted first by others in the immediate vicinity and surrounding area, and only later by official public safety personnel. The spontaneous provision of assistance is facilitated by the fact that when crises occur, they take place in the context of ongoing community life and daily routines. That is, they affect not isolated individuals, but rather people who are embedded in networks of social relationships. Humans do not, under the pressure of an emergency, socially collapse. Rather, they seem to display higher levels of social cohesion, despite what media or government agents might expect or portray on TV. Humans, after the apocalypse, band together in collectives to help one another, and they do this spontaneously. Disaster response workers call it spontaneous pro-social helping behavior, and it saves lives. Spontaneous mobilization to help during and immediately after an apocalyptic shock has a lot of forms. Sometimes it's community-sourced rescue missions, like the volunteer boat rescue group who call themselves the Cajun Navy. During Hurricane Harvey, the Cajun Navy, plus a lot of volunteer dispatchers, some thousands of miles away from the hurricane, used the walkie-talkie app Zello to crowdsource locations of people trapped by rising water and send rescuers to them. Sometimes it is the volunteering of special skills. In the aftermath of the 2017 Mexico City earthquake, Mexican seismologists, who just happened to be in town for a major conference on the last disastrous Mexico City earthquake, spent the next 2 weeks volunteering to inspect buildings for structural damage. Humans all over the world display this behavior after disasters. They display it consistently, no matter what kind of disaster is happening or what culture they come from. What really happens after an apocalypse? Society works better than it ever had for a brief time. Our centering hymn this morning is song number 146, Soon the Day Will Arrive. Please keep your mics muted and sing along as you wish.
Soon the day will arrive when we will be together, and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on that day thunder clouds will appear. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some have dreamed, some have died to make a bright tomorrow, and our vision remains in our hearts. Now the torch must be passed with new hope, not in sorrow, and a promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see
This isn't the apocalypse pop culture prepared us for. We were promised fire and panic and blood in the streets, shambling hordes of zombies and cities disappearing in mushroom clouds. We were promised leather-clad biker gangs and the ruins of famous monuments and the Statue of Liberty, half burned on the shore. Instead, what we got was quieter, more subtle and more slow rolling than anyone could have guessed. It's an apocalypse of sheltering at home and baking bread, rainbows in windows, and long walks in spring, and Lysol. Adam Lee wrote this in an article for his blog on the website Pathos in early May, just a few months and a seeming lifetime ago. I want to open this sermon with his words because on the one hand, he admits what is so hard for me to do, which is to say that this is an apocalypse. We are living in an age of apocalyptic and deeply unsettling events. And he points to the reason why I find it so difficult to say this without feeling hyperbolic. I'm struggling to both comprehend and express what is going on all around us, and I don't feel alone in that. Our culture, through fundamentalist Christian visions of the end times and the hyperbole of Hollywood, has set our end time expectations against mythological standards. Even though so many pieces of our lives have changed irreversibly, calling these events an apocalypse still sounds excessive. Parts of our world certainly have changed and are certainly ending. So many parts of our world, lives and lifeways, have been lost in the course of the last year. And because of these, things will never return to the way they were before this pandemic. But I don't think we're living through the end times. We are living through an apocalypse, but not the end times. We are facing the end of so many things we took for granted, but this is not the end. What we're experiencing right now is a revelation of how things actually are, and it's a revelation of who we are when things get tough. And as tough as this year has been, we have responded in some way to meet every calamity we've faced. I've spent a lot of time in this pandemic chewing on the idea of apocalypse. I've often thought back to something a priest from my childhood said. Dan, with a lot of his characteristic poise, was one of the first people I heard point out that the origin of our word apocalypse comes from another word meaning uncovering or revealing, like a veil being pulled back, like our English word revelation. That an apocalyptic event, whether it's straight out of the Christian book of Revelations or not, is a revelation of things as they are in a profound cosmic way. I've spent a lot of time meditating on this over the last several months. It's a more mystical understanding of the word that looks to the long view of things. It shows up in our reading, in our first reading today, and in other sources I've drawn from to put this service together. But generally, this isn't the level of composure we associate with the apocalypse. Our popular culture is full of apocalyptic visions, with movies about zombie pandemics, nuclear aftermath, and conspiracies about Mayan calendars and the fragility of our supply chains and information systems. And in the United States, our religious culture is filled with warnings of, or even hopes for, the second coming and the literal manifestation of the book of Revelations. These days, any high visibility figure, from the Pope to the President of the United States, might get branded as the catalyst of the end days. Even when we don't subscribe to stark visions of human destiny, we still encounter and contend with them. As individuals or wider traditions, we acknowledge their presence among us, if not our shared belief. Unitarian Universalists aren't an apocalyptic bunch, by and large. We haven't built a theology around the end days. We don't talk about a future time when wrong will be made right, or even when the will of God, the true nature of things, becomes fully revealed. Instead, we can pick apart this last sentence and come up with a host of new answers to ponder, such as, is there a God? Who are they? Does time have a definite end? What is time anyway? What is revelation, and do I believe in it? Instead of flipping to the end of the book to see how the story ends, we more often live in the importance of the current moment and the difference we can make here. If we look anywhere at all, this present moment is probably where we will look for our big revelations, whether it's from the divine, the universe, or human experience. We call this our living tradition. It isn't sealed with a testimony of the end days, but it continues to grow as we grow and urges us to look at the revelation of the world around us. If we're looking for big revelations, we're asking questions like, what is the world revealing to us? And how do we respond to that? Most of us form our response to the world's revelation as an answer to the call of justice. Our second and sixth principles call us to seek and honor justice in our relationships with one another and our wider world. And our world is in sore need of justice. On a daily basis, we can bear witness to terrors and injustices new and old. Ones we have seen over and over again, and ones we never expected to see. We are living through an apocalypse of mythological proportions. We are in the midst of a global pandemic where a cure is a murky possibility in the near future, and the logistics of distributing it are even murkier. And alongside this, we're coming face to face with a painful reckoning of the racial, environmental, and economic violence that is now harder and harder for more and more people to ignore. The injustices that have been present for so long only burn brighter in the face of our present situation. 3 weeks after Adam Lee wrote about an apocalypse full of Lysol and bread baking, George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. A month and a half before this blog post, Breonna Taylor was murdered in Kentucky. And a few weeks before her, Ahmaud Arbery was murdered in Georgia. In the summer of 2020, amid a raging pandemic, people across the country and across the world cried out against the injustice that these 3 Black people, their families, and their communities contended with. The world cried out against the injustice of their death and the deaths of so many others, all in the middle of a pandemic. An apocalypse which has been inconvenient for some has been lethal for others. In the late summer and through the fall, the Western United States has seen wildfires perhaps worse than they've ever been in terms of geographic range and severity. And it feels like we've been saying this same thing every summer for most of the last decade. Hurricanes Laura and Delta tore through the Gulf Coast in August and October, and a derecho storm tore across much of the upper Midwest with wind speeds comparable to a Category 4 hurricane. Our world is getting warmer and wetter in some places and drier in others. Plague, murder, fire, flood. I don't mean to be brief in paying witness to these atrocities, but I think we can all see what's happening around us in some way or another. We know what's going on, and we can easily pull all of these events into one vista for ourselves. Together, these disasters have both stripped away all distraction from reality and worsened reality and compounding interest. What all these disasters share is their ability to lay bare profound inequities in wealth and access to resources. The people, families, and communities with the scarcest resources face the greatest barriers to prevention, healing, and recovery. The stripped down reality of our world is, I think, a big revelation we're witnessing right now. In the sense of both painful global upheaval and in the sense of uncovering the bitter reality of things, it seems like we are truly living through an apocalypse. As I said at the beginning of this sermon, however, the structure of the world is not the only thing revealing itself to us right now. The pandemic event is also revealing our own natures as people and the nature of our societies as well. It could be really easy to be pessimistic in the face of all of this, to look at the pain and anguish of the world and say our responsibility for this is the true revelation of human nature and the true revelation of our society's ends and design. And while it is revealing in that the injustices of our world are human wrought and human designed, I don't necessarily think that this is the most important revelation of the hour. The second reading we shared today was actually an article on science fiction, the stuff of pop culture that Adam Lee blamed for our distorted view of the apocalypse and what it would be like. And Arkady Martin agrees that works of science fiction, and by extension, the popular culture they shape, has a tendency to race to the worst conclusions when imagining the apocalypse. As she sums it up, if science fiction is, as sometimes described, a literature of ideas, then apocalyptic science fiction is the literature of how ideas go wrong. An exploration of all our bad possible futures and what might happen after. But what she points out is that in reality, humans do not respond to apocalyptic calamity with our worst, but rather our best. In fact, she says maybe society works better than it ever had, if only for a brief time. Maybe we show our greatest virtues in the direst straits. It can be really easy to look at the current situation and see only the worst. But the worst is not all there is to look at, and our worst is not all we're showing right now. Communities across the country have cared for each other with grassroots organization, activity that continues to outlive the momentary surge of attention when calamity and deep pain are revealed. Communities nationwide have supported their protesters with legal aid funds and pro bono representation in court. People have founded and sustained mutual aid funds to fight hunger, homelessness, and unemployment in their communities. And supply drives have gathered food, personal protective equipment, disaster relief supplies, and any number of other dearly needed things in our communities. If you want to see what that looks like in Des Moines and central Iowa, look at the work of Des Moines Black Lives Matter, at the Eastern Iowa Community Bond Project, at the Supply Hive, at the Des Moines Mutual Aid and Edna Griffin Mutual Aid Funds. Even this afternoon, American Friends Service Committee is gathering a supply drive for detained immigrants. Wherever you are, somewhere near you is organizing to care for their community. If you have some money or time, send it their way. If you could use some help from people like them, reach out. And the people here at First Unitarian are caring for each other in our community too. People are sewing masks, gathering donations for the food bank, calling in to check in with each other, helping each other figure Zoom out. We're finding new ways to stay connected to one another through small group ministries, through reading groups, calling trees, and social hours. Faced with hard conditions, we're finding new ways to be together and to care for one another. If you have the time or resources or ideas to share, talk to church staff and leadership. Talk to them if you need resources or connection, but you don't know how to access it. We're still finding ways to grow and nurture this community with each other, even in the face of a pandemic. Our care for one another in our communities is more substantial than any rosy platitudes about sticking together that I could give you. I don't share this message to make it sound like staying connected and caring for each other is easy. I don't think it ever really is. It certainly hasn't been these last 7 months. And I don't offer you this sermon from my perfect example of leadership and engagement, because at times staying connected and caring for the other people in this community and asking to be cared for myself has been hard for me also. But our willingness and our determination to keep showing up for each other in this congregation, this community, this world, says a lot about who we are really in this apocalypse. So many precious things are ending and slipping away, but this is not the end. This is not the end because we continue to look out for each other. And we are going to continue doing that until we are incapable of caring for one another anymore. And I think that's it. That's the big reveal of 2020. That might be our big revelation.
We extinguish the light of this hour, not to surrender to darkness, but to acknowledge that this light, held at times by darkness, guides us always on our way. Though we may leave the light of this hour, may we carry forward the commitments we have made, the strength we have sought. Please join in our closing hymn, number 1028, of Commitment.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits in the faith and freedom dear. When the fire of commitment sets our minds for justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion is call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Our closing words are from this poem, Remembering the Future, by Reverend Teresa I. Soto. There is no more time for pretending that everything can be all right without your care, without your attention. You can mourn, grief at times being more real than the promise of the sunrise, more real than the piece of the moon that by inconstant silver turns disappears. And yet, while we may mourn changes, losses, deceptions, and betrayals, beneath the ash we find the ember. We weep, and then, as we've learned from labor movements, we organize. Remember that the day towards which we gather, the tomorrow towards which we advance. Our service has ended, but this is not the end. This is a beginning for us to carry our light into the world today and every day. Peace, Ashe, Amen, may it be so.